The sun was beginning to set over Pinewood National Park, casting long shadows through the ancient trees. Ranger James Cooper wiped sweat from his forehead as he completed his evening patrol. After 15 years working these woods, he knew every trail and creek by heart. Today had been quiet, just the way he liked it. James checked his watch. 6:45 p.m. Just enough time to make one final loop before heading back to the ranger station. He took a swig from his water bottle and started down Pine Ridge Trail, a popular spot for day hikers. The late September air carried the first hints of autumn. Leaves crunched under his boots as he walked, making mental notes about trail maintenance needed before winter. A fallen branch here, erosion beginning there. The job was never done. As he rounded a bend in the trail, something caught his attention. A small backpack lay abandoned near the path. Blue with dinosaur patches, clearly belonging to a child. James frowned. Finding lost items wasn't unusual, but something felt wrong. "Hello," he called out. "Park ranger. Anyone there?" Only silence answered him. James picked up the backpack, examining it. The name Tyler was written in marker on the inside tag. A half-eaten sandwich and juice box were still inside. Recent. That's when he heard it. A faint sound coming from off-trail. A whimper? James turned his head, listening carefully. "Is someone there?" He called again, moving toward the sound. The whimpering grew louder. Following it about 50 yards from the main path, James pushed through a thick patch of bushes and froze at what he saw. 2 children, a boy around 8 and younger girl maybe 6, huddled together against a large boulder. Their faces were dirty, streaked with tears. The girl clutched a tattered teddy bear while the boy stood protectively in front of her. James immediately crouched down, trying to appear less intimidating. "Hey there," he said softly. "I'm Ranger Cooper. Are you two okay?" The children stared at him with wide, frightened eyes. The boy swallowed hard before speaking. "Our dad fell off the cliff," he said, voice trembling. Those 5 words sent a chill down James's spine. He glanced toward the ridge about 100 yards away, a steep drop of at least 60 feet to the rocky creek below. "How long ago?" James asked, already reaching for his radio. "When the sun was up there," the girl pointed high in the sky. "Hours ago." James kept his voice calm despite the alarm bells ringing in his head. "What are your names?" "I'm Tyler," the boy said. "This is my sister Emma. Dad told us to stay here and not move while he took pictures by the edge." James nodded, quickly assessing the situation. If their father had fallen hours ago, every minute counted now. The temperature would drop quickly after sunset, and if the man was injured and exposed to the elements. "You did exactly right by staying put," James told them, trying to sound reassuring. "I'm going to help you and find your dad. Is your mom here too?" Emma shook her head. "Mommy's in heaven," she whispered. James felt his heart sink. These kids might have been alone in the wilderness for hours, waiting for a father who couldn't return to them. He keyed his radio. "Station, this is Cooper. I got an emergency on Pine Ridge. 2 miners, approximately 6 and 8 years old, reporting their father fell from the east overlook. Need immediate backup and search and rescue. Over." The radio crackled. "Copy that, Cooper. Sending backup. ETA 20 minutes. Over." 20 minutes. James looked at the frightened children, then toward the darkening sky. Night was coming fast, and somewhere below, their father might be fighting for his life. "Tyler, Emma," he said gently, taking off his jacket to wrap around the shivering girl. "I'm going to help you. But first, can you tell me exactly what happened to your dad?" Tyler wiped his nose on his sleeve as he looked up at Ranger Cooper. The boy's eyes were red from crying, but he spoke clearly, trying to be brave for his little sister. "Dad wanted to take pictures of the sunset from the big rocks," Tyler explained. "He told us to stay back where it's safe, but he kept moving closer to the edge." James nodded, encouraging the boy while he pulled an emergency blanket from his pack and wrapped it around both children. The evening air was growing colder by the minute. Emma was scared and called to him. Tyler continued. He turned around to wave at us, and then his voice broke. Then he just disappeared. We heard him yell. Emma buried her face in her teddy bear. "Daddy made a really bad sound," she whispered. James felt his stomach tighten. A fall from that height could be deadly, especially if the victim had been lying injured for hours. He needed to act fast, but he couldn't leave two young children alone in the darkening forest. "Did your dad have a phone with him?" James asked. Tyler nodded. "But we don't know the password. We tried to use it after he fell, but we couldn't." Smart kids, James thought. They had tried to get help before hiding by the boulder. "We got scared when it got darker," Emma said. There were noises. James checked his watch. His backup wouldn't arrive for at least 15 minutes. Every minute could be critical for the children's father. "Listen, both of you," he said firmly but gently. "You've been incredibly brave. I need to help your dad, but I can't leave you here alone." He assessed his options quickly. The east overlook wasn't far, but the descent to the creek bed below was treacherous, especially in fading light. Standard procedure would be to wait for backup, but a man's life hung in the balance. James made his decision. He pulled out his flashlight and extra radio. "Tyler, Emma, I need you to be my special helpers," he said, crouching to their level. "We're going to walk together to find a safer place, and then I'm going to look for your dad." The children nodded solemnly. James took Emma's small hand in his while Tyler held onto his sister's other hand, forming a chain. "Stay close. Okay, the path might be a little scary, but I promise I won't let anything happen to you." As they walked, James radioed updates to the station. The response team was assembling, including medical personnel. A helicopter was on standby, but couldn't fly until morning if the weather worsened as predicted. Through the trees, they could now see the east overlook, a rocky outcropping that offered spectacular views, but had always worried James because visitors often ignored the safety barriers. "It was over there," Tyler pointed with a trembling finger, "by the pointy rock." James guided them to a small clearing about 50 yards from the cliff edge. It was close enough to the trail that backup would find them easily, but far enough from the edge to be safe. "I need you both to stay right here," he said, setting down his backpack. He took out water bottles, energy bars, and an emergency light. "Tyler, you're in charge of this light. If you see other rangers, turn it on and off 3 times. That's our special signal, okay?" The boy nodded, gripping the light tightly. "Are you going to save Daddy?" Emma asked, her small voice quavering. James met her eyes. "I'm going to do everything I can," he promised. He gave them one last reassuring smile before turning toward the overlook. The radio crackled with news that the rescue team was only 10 minutes away, but James knew that for the man at the bottom of the cliff, each of those minutes might be the difference between life and death. As he approached the edge carefully, he could see where the ground had given way under someone's weight. Fresh dirt and broken roots marked the spot where a father had fallen while trying to capture the perfect sunset picture. James peered over the edge into the growing darkness below, took a deep breath, and began planning his descent. The cliff edge was dangerous in daylight. Now, with shadows stretching across the canyon, it was treacherous. James secured his safety rope to a sturdy pine tree, tugging it twice to test its strength. He could hear the faint sounds of Emma humming nervously to her teddy bear in the clearing behind him. "Base, this is Cooper," he spoke into his radio. "I've secured the children and I'm preparing to descend the east ridge to locate the father. His name is—" James paused, realizing he didn't know. "Mr. David," Emma called out, hearing his hesitation. "Daddy's name is David Fisher." "The father is David Fisher," James continued. "Children report he fell approximately 5 hours ago. I'm beginning descent now." The radio crackled. "Cooper, this is Chief Martinez. Rescue team is 7 minutes out. Recommend you wait for backup." James looked over the edge again. The creek bed below was already in deep shadow. If David Fisher was injured but alive down there, hypothermia would be setting in as temperatures dropped. "Negative, Chief. If he's alive, he doesn't have 7 minutes. I'm proceeding with caution." James turned to the children one last time. "Remember, stay right here. The other rangers will find you soon." Tyler nodded seriously, clutching his sister's hand. "We'll be brave." With his headlamp switched on, James began his controlled descent down the cliff face. The beam of light cut through the growing darkness, illuminating the rocky wall in front of him. He moved carefully, testing each foothold before committing his weight. Halfway down, a sudden gust of wind made him press against the rock face. Small pebbles tumbled past him, disappearing into the darkness below. The temperature was dropping fast as night settled over the canyon. "Mr. Fisher," he called out. "David Fisher. Can you hear me?" Only the whisper of wind answered him. 3/4 of the way down, James's boot dislodged a larger rock that crashed loudly into the creek bed. The noise echoed through the canyon, and then something else. A weak groan. "Mr. Fisher? David?" James called again, more urgently. "This is Park Ranger Cooper. Make a noise if you can hear me." Another groan, slightly louder. James quickened his pace, still careful but driven by new urgency. As he neared the bottom, his headlamp caught a flash of blue fabric among the gray rocks. He found David Fisher crumpled at the base of the cliff. The man lay on his side, his right leg bent at an unnatural angle. His face was pale and dirt-streaked, but his eyes fluttered open at the brightness of James's headlamp. "My kids," David whispered, his voice barely audible. "They're safe," James assured him, immediately kneeling to assess his injuries. "Tyler and Emma are okay. They stayed put just like you told them." Relief washed over David's face before pain took over again. James worked quickly, checking vital signs. David's pulse was weak and rapid. His skin felt cold and clammy, signs of shock and probable internal bleeding. "I need to warm you up," James explained, pulling emergency heat blankets from his pack. "You've been out here too long." David's breathing was shallow. Tried to climb back. Couldn't. "Save your strength," James told him, wrapping the reflective blankets around David's body. He splinted the obviously broken leg using branches and strips torn from his own undershirt. Above them, the sound of voices carried on the night air. The rescue team had arrived at the top. "Down here," James shouted upward. "I found him. We need a basket stretcher and medical." He turned back to David, who was struggling to stay conscious. "Help is here now. Think about Tyler and Emma. They need you to fight." David's eyes focused slightly at the mention of his children. "Tell them I'm sorry." "You'll tell them yourself," James said firmly, injecting warming IV fluids into David's arm, a wilderness medicine technique that could buy precious time. "But first, we need to get you out of this canyon." As the rescue team prepared the complicated nighttime extraction, James held David's hand firmly in his own. Above them, 2 frightened children waited, clutching each other and a tattered teddy bear, their whole world hanging by a thread as thin as the rescue ropes now being lowered into the darkness. Above the canyon, Chief Martinez and 3 other rangers found Tyler and Emma exactly where James had left them. Tyler was holding the emergency light just as instructed, flashing it 3 times when he spotted the rescue team. "You must be Tyler and Emma," Chief Martinez said, kneeling before them. "I'm Chief Martinez. We're here to help your dad." Emma clutched her teddy bear tighter. "Is Ranger Cooper going to save Daddy?" "Ranger Cooper is the best we have," the chief assured her. "Right now, we need to get you 2 somewhere warm and safe." One ranger stayed with the children while the others hurried to the cliff edge. They quickly set up powerful spotlights that cut through the darkness, illuminating the canyon below. The beam found James and David at the bottom, with James waving to signal their position. Down in the canyon, James monitored David's condition closely. The man drifted in and out of consciousness, grimacing with pain whenever he was awake. "Stay with me, David," James urged, checking his pulse again. It was weaker than before. "Your kids need you to stay strong." David's eyes fluttered open. "Are they really okay?" he whispered. "They're brave kids," James told him. "Tyler protected his sister. Emma never let go of her teddy bear. They did everything right." A thin smile crossed David's pale lips. "After Sarah died, promised to keep them safe. Failed them." James leaned closer. "You haven't failed anyone. Accidents happen. What matters is you're still fighting." The rescue basket began its descent, swaying slightly in the night breeze. 2 emergency medical technicians rappelled alongside it, their headlamps bobbing like fireflies in the darkness. "Patient's name is David Fisher," James reported as they reached the bottom. "Approximately 5 hours since fall. Multiple fractures, suspected internal bleeding, moderate to severe hypothermia." The EMTs worked quickly. They placed a cervical collar around David's neck and carefully transferred him to the basket. One inserted an IV while the other took vital signs. "BP is 90/60ths and dropping," the EMT said. "We need to move fast." James helped secure David in the rescue basket. "We're getting you out of here," he told him. "Your kids will be waiting." David's hand suddenly gripped James' wrist with surprising strength. "Promise me," he whispered urgently. "Promise you'll look after them if I don't." "You're going to make it," James said firmly. "But yes, I promise. Now focus on staying alive." The extraction was delicate and dangerous. Two rangers above operated the pulley system while the EMTs guided the basket to prevent it from banging against the cliff face. James climbed alongside, keeping pace with the basket, unwilling to leave David alone. Halfway up, disaster nearly struck. A sudden gust of wind slammed the basket against the rock wall. David cried out in pain as the impact jolted his broken body. "Steady," James shouted upward. "Easy on the line." The rangers above adjusted quickly, stabilizing the basket. James reached out to steady it with his hand, putting himself at risk to protect the injured father. As they neared the top, James could see Tyler and Emma being led away by a female ranger. He had insisted they shouldn't watch the dangerous extraction. They needed to remember their father as strong, not broken and bloodied in a rescue basket. Finally, they reached the cliff edge. Strong hands pulled the basket onto solid ground. The spotlights revealed the full extent of David's injuries. His leg badly broken, bruises darkening his face, blood seeping through the blankets. "Get him to the clearing," the lead EMT instructed. "Chopper's on its way." James pulled himself over the edge, muscles burning from the climb. Chief Martinez helped him to his feet. "The kids?" James asked immediately. "At the ranger station," Martinez replied. "They're asking for you." James looked toward the medical team working on David. They had inserted breathing tubes and were attaching monitoring equipment. Their faces were grim, focused. "How bad?" James asked quietly. Martinez shook his head. "It's touch and go. Without you getting to him when you did, he'd already be gone." In the distance, the distinctive thump of helicopter blades cut through the night air. A race against time was underway, with two frightened children's futures hanging in the balance. The ranger station buzzed with activity as medical personnel prepared David for helicopter transport. Outside on the small landing pad, the chopper's blades whirred, creating a constant thundering rhythm that filled the night. Inside, James found Tyler and Emma huddled together on a small couch in the break room. A female ranger named Susan sat with them, trying to distract them with a picture book. When they saw James, both children's eyes widened with hope. "Ranger Cooper," Tyler jumped up. "Did you save our dad?" James sat down on the coffee table across from them, bringing himself to eye level with the children. "The doctors are helping your dad right now," he explained gently. "He's hurt pretty badly, but he's fighting hard." Emma's bottom lip trembled. Is Daddy going to die like Mommy did? The question hung heavy in the air. James knew better than to make promises he couldn't keep, but he also understood the terror these children were feeling. "The doctors are doing everything they can," he said. "Your dad is very strong, and he loves you both very much. That gives him something special to fight for." Susan touched James's shoulder. "They need to know the plan," she whispered. James nodded. "Tyler, Emma, a helicopter is going to take your dad to a big hospital in the city. It's the best place for him to get better. Can we go with him?" Tyler asked, his small face full of worry. "The helicopter is just for your dad and the doctors," James explained. "But we're going to drive you to the hospital too, so you can be there when he wakes up." Chief Martinez appeared in the doorway, his expression somber. He motioned for James to step outside. James squeezed both children's hands before joining his boss in the hallway. "How bad?" James asked quietly. "Critical. Internal bleeding, punctured lung, severe hypothermia, and that's just what they can see," Martinez replied. "They're stabilizing him for transport, but—" He left the sentence unfinished. James ran a hand through his hair. "What about the kids? Any family we can call?" "We found his wallet. Emergency contact card lists a sister in Colorado. We're trying to reach her now," Martinez said. "Until then, child services will have to take them." James looked back through the doorway at the two small figures. Emma was clutching her teddy bear so tightly its head was bent at an odd angle. Tyler sat straight-backed, trying to be brave but clearly terrified. "No," James said firmly. "I promised their father I'd look after them. They're not going with strangers tonight." Martinez raised an eyebrow. "What are you suggesting?" "I'll take responsibility for them until the aunt arrives. They can stay at my cabin. It's not protocol, but it's what's right, James insisted. After a moment, Martinez nodded. I'll clear it with the department. These are special circumstances. Outside, the medical team was loading David into the helicopter. James brought the children to a window where they could see, but kept them back from the noise and wind. They're taking good care of your dad, he reassured them as they watched with wide eyes. The helicopter lifted off, its powerful searchlight creating a circle of brightness that diminished as it rose into the night sky. Soon it was just a blinking light moving toward the distant city. Emma began to cry softly. Tyler put his arm around his sister but looked lost himself. Listen, James said, kneeling before them. You're going to stay at my cabin tonight. It's not far from here. I have hot chocolate and a spare room where you can rest. Tomorrow, we'll go to the hospital to see your dad. Promise? Tyler asked, his voice small. I promise, James replied, meaning it completely. As he gathered the children's few belongings and helped them into his truck, James thought about the fragile trust these kids had placed in him. First by staying where their father had told them, then by believing James could save him. Now they were trusting him to keep them safe through the night. The weight of that responsibility settled on his shoulders as he drove carefully down the dark forest road, two orphaned for the moment children in his backseat, their father fighting for his life miles away in the sky above them. James's cabin sat nestled among tall pines, a simple wooden structure he had called home for the past 12 years. As he pulled into the gravel driveway, both children had fallen asleep in the back seat of his truck, exhausted from their ordeal. We're here, he said softly, turning to wake them. Tyler's eyes opened immediately, alert like a child who had learned to be ready for anything. Emma took longer to wake, still clutching her teddy bear even in sleep. The cabin was rustic but warm. A stone fireplace dominated the main room, with comfortable, well-worn furniture arranged around it. Photos of wilderness landscapes covered the walls, places James had explored throughout his career as a ranger. It's just for tonight, James explained as he showed them inside. Tomorrow we'll go see your dad. It smells like trees in here, Emma observed, her small nose wrinkling. James smiled. That's pine. I made a lot of the furniture myself. He quickly prepared the spare bedroom, normally used for storage but kept ready for occasional visitors. While the children washed up, James heated milk on the stove for hot chocolate, adding extra marshmallows. As they sat at his kitchen table with steaming mugs, Tyler finally asked the question James had been dreading. What if our dad doesn't get better? James met the boy's steady gaze. Your dad is getting the best care possible. No matter what happens, you won't be alone. Your aunt is coming from Colorado to help. Aunt Claire? Emma perked up slightly. She gives good hugs. That's right, James nodded. Chief Martinez reached her. She's driving here tomorrow. Tyler seemed to process this information carefully. Our mom died when Emma was 3. Dad said sometimes people we love have to leave even when they don't want to. The simple wisdom in the child's words made James's heart ache. These kids had already lost too much. After hot chocolate, James found them clean t-shirts to sleep in and tucked them into the spare bed. Emma insisted her teddy bear needed to face the door to keep watch, while Tyler asked if they could leave a light on. Of course, James said, leaving the hallway light on and the bedroom door cracked open. I'll be just down the hall if you need anything. He started to leave when Emma's small voice stopped him. Ranger Cooper? Can you check if there are monsters under the bed? Daddy always checks. James stolidly got down on his knees and made a thorough inspection under the bed. All clear. No monsters allowed in a ranger's cabin. This seemed to satisfy Emma, who snuggled deeper under the blankets. Once the children were settled, James called the hospital for an update. The news was cautiously positive. David had survived surgery and was in intensive care. Still critical, but stable. James sank into his armchair, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. The events of the day replayed in his mind. Finding the children, the dangerous descent. David's broken body, the promise he'd made. His phone buzzed with a text from Chief Martinez. Sister arriving noon tomorrow. Good work today, Cooper. James looked toward the spare room where 2 orphaned for the night children slept. He thought about how differently this day could have ended. If the children had wandered off, if he hadn't found them, if David had been lying at the bottom of that cliff much longer. Sometimes minutes made all the difference between tragedy and hope. Outside, an owl hooted in the darkness. Inside the cabin, for the first time in years, James wasn't alone. The responsibility felt strangely right. He checked on the children one last time before settling on the couch for the night, unwilling to sleep too deeply in case they needed him. Tyler and Emma were sleeping soundly, their small bodies curled toward each other like comma marks in the story of their interrupted childhood. Morning light filtered through the pine trees outside James's cabin, casting dappled shadows across the kitchen floor. He had been up since dawn, making pancakes shaped like bears and moose, a special breakfast he thought might bring some comfort to the children. The aroma of coffee and maple syrup filled the small cabin when Tyler appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair tousled from sleep but eyes alert. "Is there news about our dad?" were his first words. James nodded, flipping a pancake shaped roughly like a pine tree. "I called the hospital this morning. Your dad made it through the night. He's still sleeping because of the medicines they gave him, but the doctors say that's good for healing." Relief washed over Tyler's face. Emma joined them moments later, her teddy bear dragging behind her. When she saw the animal-shaped pancakes, her eyes widened with delight, the first genuine happiness James had seen from either child since finding them. "Teddy wants the bear one," she announced, climbing onto a chair. As they ate, James explained the plan for the day. "We'll drive to the hospital after breakfast. Your Aunt Claire should arrive around lunchtime. Will we get to see Dad?" Tyler asked between bites. "The doctors will decide when you can visit him," James explained gently. "He has lots of machines helping him right now." Emma looked up from carefully feeding a tiny piece of pancake to her teddy bear. "Is he going to have scars like in the movies?" James considered his answer carefully. "He might have some scars, yes, but scars just show that you're stronger than whatever tried to hurt you." This seemed to satisfy Emma, who nodded solemnly before returning to her breakfast. After the children were dressed in their clothes from yesterday, now clean and dry after James had washed them overnight, they piled into his truck for the hour-long drive to the city hospital. Tyler sat in the front passenger seat, watching the forest give way to small towns and eventually the city outskirts. "Our dad takes us camping a lot," Tyler said suddenly. "He says nature is the best teacher." James nodded. "Your dad sounds very wise." "He teaches science at the high school," Tyler continued. "He knows everything about rocks and trees. He lets me collect leaves," Emma added from the back seat. "I have 37 different kinds." James listened as the children shared stories about their father, camping trips, science experiments in the kitchen, stargazing from their backyard. With each story, a clearer picture emerged of David Fisher, a devoted father doing his best to raise two children alone after losing his wife. At the hospital, James led them through the busy lobby to the intensive care unit. The stark white corridors and antiseptic smell were a sharp contrast to the natural world James and the children were accustomed to. A doctor met them outside the IQ doors, Dr. Patel, a serious woman with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Fisher is still in critical condition," she explained to James, "but he's showing positive signs. The next 48 hours will be crucial." "Can the children see him?" James asked. Dr. Patel hesitated. "Normally we don't allow children in the IQ, but given the circumstances." She looked down at Tyler and Emma's hopeful faces. 5 minutes, but I should prepare them for what they'll see." She knelt to the children's level and explained gently about the tubes and machines helping their father breathe and monitor his heart. "He might look different than you remember, but it's still your dad underneath all that equipment." Tyler nodded bravely. Emma clutched her teddy bear tighter. "Ready?" Dr. Patel asked. Both children looked up at James, who gave them an encouraging nod. Together, they stepped through the IQ doors, about to face one of the hardest moments of their young lives, seeing their invincible father reduced to a fragile patient fighting for his life. The hospital room was quieter than Emma expected. She had imagined loud beeping machines like in TV shows, but instead there was just a soft, steady rhythm, the sound of her father's heartbeat translated into electronic pulses. David Fisher lay still on the white bed, surrounded by equipment. Tubes ran from his arms, and a larger tube helped him breathe. His face was bruised, with a bandage covering part of his forehead. His leg was suspended in a cast. Tyler moved forward first, approaching the bed cautiously. Emma hung back near James, suddenly afraid. "It's okay," James whispered, gently encouraging her. "Remember what Dr. Patel said. He's still your dad under all that equipment." Emma nodded and took small steps toward the bed, her teddy bear clutched against her chest like a shield. "Can he hear us?" Tyler asked the nurse who stood nearby. "Many patients can hear even when they can't respond," the nurse explained. "You should talk to him. Tell him you're here." Tyler took his father's hand carefully, avoiding the IV line. "Dad, it's me. Tyler. Emma's here too. We're okay." Emma moved to the other side of the bed. "Teddy and I are here, Daddy," she said in a tiny voice. "Please wake up soon." Dr. Patel watched from the doorway, then signaled to James that their time was almost up. But before they could leave, something unexpected happened. David's fingers twitched, his eyelids fluttered. The nurse moved quickly to check his vital signs. "He's responding to their voices," she said with surprise. "This is good." David's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then finding Tyler's face. Recognition dawned in his gaze. He couldn't speak because of the breathing tube, but tears formed in his eyes as he weakly squeezed his son's hand. "Dad." Tyler's voice broke with emotion. "You're awake." Emma bounced on her toes. "Daddy sees us. Look." The moment was interrupted by a commotion at the door. A woman with auburn hair rushed in, her face flushed from hurrying. "Claire," the children exclaimed in unison. Aunt Claire swept both children into a tight embrace, her eyes never leaving her brother's face. "I came as soon as I heard," she said, voice thick with emotion. Dr. Patel ushered them all out shortly after, explaining that David needed rest but was showing remarkable improvement. "Family voices can be powerful medicine," she told James. "Those children might have done more for him than all our equipment." In the waiting room, Claire thanked James with tears in her eyes. "The park rangers called me last night. They said you risked your life to save my brother." James shrugged modestly. "I was just doing my job." "You did more than that," Claire insisted. "You kept his children safe. You gave them stability when their world was falling apart." Tyler approached James, standing tall like someone trying to be grown up. "Are you leaving now?" he asked. James nodded. "I need to get back to the park. There might be other people who need help." "Like us," Emma said, still holding her teddy bear. James knelt down to their level. "Exactly like you. But your dad is awake now, and your Aunt Claire is here. You're going to be okay." Emma surprised him by throwing her arms around his neck. "Thank you for saving Daddy," she whispered. Tyler joined the hug, his thin arms strong with gratitude. "Dad says every person is like a tree, connected to others through roots we can't see. I think you're part of our forest now." James felt something tighten in his chest. After years of solitary patrols and quiet nights in his cabin, these children had reminded him what it meant to be truly connected to others. 2 weeks later, James received a hand-drawn card in the mail. It showed a forest with 4 stick figures holding hands, 2 small, 2 tall. Inside, in careful child's handwriting, were the words, "Our family forest is growing. Come visit soon." At the bottom, in adult handwriting, "Some debts can never be repaid, but we'll spend a lifetime trying. Thank you for everything. David, Tyler, Emma, and Teddy." James pinned the card above his desk at the ranger station, a reminder that sometimes the most important rescues leave no official record, except in the hearts of those who were saved.